Clear. I think fine. Clear. I think I'm ready enough. So yesterday, what we have discussed something called software and how does the software was built. You will have a different teams, and using these teams, you will try to build a particular a feature. We basically call it as a build, and different teams are allocated for different time. Basically, we call it as sprint planning. And now the question is, as right now, Arun is someone who has his IT business, right? He have taken a project from mine, and he started segregating this IT that project work for different teams. Okay, team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4, so on. Okay, if possible. Now this team is in Hyderabad, this team is in Mumbai, this team is in USA, this team is in Canada. Okay, and then finally once they are done with their own project work, their own work, then they have to sit together and integrate so that they can finally build their software. Now how will I come to know that this team is working on so on so, or how do, when the people teams are in different areas, how do they communicate together? There should be one common platform which should connect all these teams, right? Because these people will, their time zone is different from this one and this one, right? So in that case they can't communicate when they are working with this. True, when they are working they might be sleeping. True. Now the question is, how do they come to know that they have done the work, or how do they basically communicate? There should be one common platform which they will get connected to each other. That's where it comes into the picture. GitHub. GitHub is one platform which is going to connect all the teams, team 1, team 2, team 3, so on, team N. When they are done with their work, they will push the code into this repository, the GitHub repository. Okay, and then finally they will integrate it. Okay, once the final product was done, they will try to push it into production server if possible. Clear? So that's the reason I asked you to create a GitHub account. So you are ready with your GitHub accounts right now? True. So you, whenever you write the code, and you will start pushing that code into the GitHub repositories. Okay. Now, so yesterday what we have discussed there are, when we write a code, okay, where do you write is what the question. We have gone through something called terminal. Okay, the code editors. There is something called IDE, and then something called notebooks, which we have discussed. In which terminal is one way of writing the code. Okay, and the code editors like Sublime, VS, and what else? Do you have any other thing? Okay, like, do we have any other code editors? Notepad, right? When it comes to IDE, PyCharm, and Spider. These are the IDEs. And when it comes to notebook, it is a Jupyter notebook. True. So in which we would be using VS for our own uh, efficiency kind of thing. So I personally suggest to go with this, because most of the companies use Windows as an operating system, in which Microsoft their own product, right? So they might be using this. True. So let's go with this and we'll start coding. So any questions as of now? Any questions? No? Clear. So we'll start the next one. Fine. If you see, right now we are into the main subject called Python. So what we're gonna discuss here? We're gonna first discuss here basics one, and we're gonna discuss something called basics two. Okay. In basics one, what you gonna do? You're gonna learn what are the different types of data types which are there in the programming language, like hint, float, bool, string, so on, so on, so. And in the basics too, you will learn how can you implement or how can you work on these data types. Basically, you're gonna perform certain actions on this, okay, on these data types. From there, if you really want to go ahead, you have to choose something called advanced topics where you want to get into. For example, if someone wants to get into AI field, choose AI as their field and start building it, building your career in AI. If someone wants to get into something called automation, learn Selenium kind of stuff, get into automation. If someone wants to learn something, what web scraping, web development, you can you can even also do that. Like you might be uh, using the libraries called Flask, Django framework. Okay, for automation you might be using for automation scripts, Selenium. When it comes to AI, you might be using PyTorch, okay, Kaiser, TensorFlow. There are different kinds of libraries where you go call these libraries and make function. Call these libraries basically packages and all modules, and you start working with this. And there are many other fields like data science and all. It's up to you. It's your own choice. Clear? So what we're gonna learn the basics one. We're gonna learn data types and all. Now, my question is why only Python? Why only Python? My question, my another question is how many programming languages we have? So how many programming languages do we have? Go search Google, Google and see.
Many languages.
List out the programming languages available in this world, and you will get the first Wikipedia link. List of programming languages. How many you see it? Lot many.
250
You see.
to 2500
So if you see, there are lot many
program.
programming languages available, right? So my question is, why these many languages? Why these many languages? Because every software has its own requirement. So depending upon the software or depending upon the project that we deal, so we choose different kind of programming languages. For example, if you are a Salesforce developer, you might use Apex or JavaScript. Okay, Apex or JavaScript. It depends upon you, right? So that depending upon your application, you choose the language that you want to. Okay. So in which why we are using Python, because Python is not a simple language. Because when you learn Python, as I said you can get into any field which you want. This is something called Vajrayuda. Learn this and you can kill any one of this. If possible, everything, every technology. Clear? Any questions on this? No? So right now we are learning Python. In that case, what we gonna become? we're going to become something called developers, right? True. So you will become a developer. Now, how do a developer and the other developer usually communicate in a coding platform? There should be some common terms that you and the other person have to know it, right? So it's not just you or writing the code. When you write the code, if someone wants to, for example, you are the one who is working for some XYZ company and you started moving to some other company ABC. Okay. So in that case, what happens? You are supposed to relieve your project or to explain someone who is no who is coming into your position, right? So in that case, you have to explain each and everything, whatever you have written, what are the consequences that you have gone through. There should be some common thing that you have to know, that how can you communicate with the other person, right? There is some language that you need to communicate. So for which you should know some terminologies which are there in the coding languages. Clear? For which basically we call it as basically we have certain called terms. First thing, what are the terms? You might be hearing about the words called something called variable. Okay. You might be hearing about something called if loop or while loop. These are the certain terms, statements. Okay. There are certain terms which you should know. That's how we can communicate, right? So you should always learn what all the terminologies which are there, okay, in the Python right now. Because since we are learning Python, you should know what all the things that uh, terminologies which are there. For example, we also call something called instantiation. Okay, this is a term that we use it. Okay, so you should always know these terms. Be ready with each and every term that we go through in this course. Clear? And when we know certain terms, you should know something called what are the different types of data types which are there. What are the different types of data types we have? Okay, and when you know the data types, you should also know how you're gonna perform action on this. How you gonna perform action on these data types? And the foremost and last important thing, because coding language is something which is everyday new concept. You might be learning some or the other new stuff. Okay, it's not that everyone have to remember everything which is there. Okay, for which when you don't know, the only thing that you have to do is something called you have to Google. Clear? You have to Google it, understand it, and make it happen. Clear? For example, you are working on project A, okay, which you started working and you are very good at in doing this particular project. Okay, now you move to some other company and you started building some other project in which you don't know what exactly they are using. In which what you have to do, you can't every you can't go every time somewhere to your team leader or something else, go get the things done. No one is going to help you in real time world. You have to go Google it, you have to learn, and you have to implement those concepts. Clear? So what are the first thing? First thing, you have to know what are the terms which are there, what are the terms which are there, and what are the data types which we have, and the actions that you need to perform on these data types. How you gonna perform? You have to learn it. And when you are done, how to use this, how to perform actions on these data types. When you don't know, the only one of the best way is what? To Google it. Clear? Now what we gonna do from here? The moment I write the code, you have to practice along with me. That's how you will learn certain things. It's not that I'm going to teach you and you're gonna just see it. No, you're gonna practice right now with me as well. That's how you will come to know the importance of it. Clear? Clear? Any doubts? No? So let's clear this off. Fine. So as I discussed in the Python basics one, okay, So in Python basics 1. So first we're gonna deal something called, so in Python basics 1 is this, is not helping me to do this. Oh, clear. So first thing that we're gonna learn is data types. Okay. Now what are the data types? Okay. Data types are
Amma, I
basically,
can't see the screen.
can't see the screen? Oh,
No.
1 second, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. I think you can see the screen now, right? Uh, so now what are the different types of data types available? Okay. So now what do you mean by data types? Data types are basically values. Okay. Basically we call it as a value. A value in a Python. Okay. What all you can do? You can modify this value, you can remove this value, and you can perform certain activities on these values. Okay, on this particular data. Okay. Now what all these data? What all these values? The first thing is called hint. Okay. Next you call it as float. If you are aware of some other programming languages, okay, you might be, familiar with these terms. Okay. There is something called string. There is something called, okay, let me replace this with boolean. Okay. There is something called string. There is something called a list. There is something called dictionary, called tuple. There is something called set. And if you see, these are the these are the data types which are initially right now which are there. So we call these data types as called as fundamental data types. These are the basic data types which are available in any programming languages. Okay. Now how you gonna assign these values? There is a term called variable. Okay. There is a term called variable, and you will assign a value to a particular variable. For example, if I put something called x equal to 2, okay, that means you are assigning the value to a variable called x. Okay. Now you should also know why we are calling this as a variable. Variable, by the term itself, it says which changes with respect to time. Okay. Today the morning temperature is 35 degrees centigrade, but in the evening, will it be the same? No, it will be something 22 degrees centigrade or something else, right? Since the value of this, that is temperature, is changing, we call it as a variable. Do you understand? But if you can't write like this, you can't assign a variable to a constant, right? Because if some other time, for example, if this is 35 degrees centigrade and the temperature right now has decreased or increased for like, let us assume it is decreased to 22 degrees centigrade. Now is 25, 22 is same as 32, 35 are both same? No, right? So in that case you should never ever assign a variable with this changing with respect to a time to a constant. So you should always assign a value to a variable. This is called as binding. Do remember the term called binding. We call it as binding. Okay. Now, if you see, we are assigning a value. If you see that integers, okay. Integers ranging from minus infinity to plus infinity are called integers. Okay. And if you see something called float, float are some kind of values where you see a decimal point. Okay, x, y, z, some number, and ABC. Okay. If you see a dot or something else, you see that is a float number. Okay. Let's deep dive into something called right now the coding. At least right now you understood, right? Boolean is something which is zero or one. True. Zero in the sense basically we call it as off or on signals, basically low and high. True. This whenever you see that the signal is low, you put it as zero and and one. True. And you might be representing a number in a boolean form as well. True. So let's deep dive into our Python project. Yes, where is my Visual Studio? So open your Visual Studio. Okay. And if you see, the code editor will be in this fashion. Did you open this? Or else even you can see this. No problem. So we are trying to create a project, right? So let's create a project. Okay. Let me create something called on the desktop. So right now we have opened a folder on my desktop under the name called Python course. Okay. Now whenever you write a code, you have to mention what kind of file is that. True. If it is a Python file, there is an extension called .py. So your file name followed by .py will say that it is a Python file. True. If it is an image, how do you format this .png or .jpg, right? So that's how the system will come to know what kind of a file is this. True. Similarly, when we are creating our own Python file, let's first use sample. Okay, sample. So how I need to save this file? What could be my extension? Sample dot py. The moment you write py, see the symbol here itself gets changed. True. So for example, if I would like to put something called a text, it becomes a text. Okay, where you can open this in notepad or something else. True. Text file. Now since I'm doing Python, so my Python code extension should be .py. Press enter, and right now you have you are into the coding place where you this is a place where you write the code. Clear. Now let's deep dive into what exactly coding that we are going to do. Now this is an interpreter. True. Python is an interpreter which goes by line, because it is not a compiler which is going to take complete file process and give the input. So it is going to go, this interpreter will go line by line. Okay, let's perform some mathematical operations here. Okay, let me put something called 2 plus 4. Okay, now if you run this code. Okay, this is a terminal. Okay, this is where you write the code, and this is where you see the output. Clear. Now if you see, there is something called eventually you might be learning what all the things which were there, but as of now it's not required. Okay, let's go simple. Don't make it will not make it much complicated. Now 2 plus 2 have 2 plus 4 which I have given. Now what could be my answer? What could be my answer?
6.
Okay, so let's see what my interpreter is going to give me as an answer. See what it gave me. It gave me nothing, right? Now what exactly happened? Now the interpreter, you have written something code. You have written 2 plus 2. We know that in the answer is 6. But you should know, right? You should display some or the other thing. As I said you earlier, when we learn certain kind of data types, and we should know how to perform certain action on this. True. It's not that the data types that we learn, we should perform certain kind of actions on this. True. So for which, if I would like to really see what is my output, there is syntax that you need to follow. Like, you might be hearing about this. Now now can you expect what could be the answer over here? You see, it gave me 6. Clear. That means what exactly happened here? When I gave only 2 plus, when I gave only 2 plus 4, what happened? It have just computed, but it didn't display anything. True. Now, if I want to get that result to be displayed, I call certain function which is already there. So that's how we call this function to display my output. Now, what exactly I'm telling to the interpreter? Understand this. The moment I write print, okay, interpreter will come to know you have to print this. Now the question, what should I print? What should I start displaying it? The moment the interpreter sees this open bracket, it will see that whatever the thing which was there in this closed brackets, I need to display. But if you see, the moment it comes here, it sees some kind of operation that was there between two numbers. So it will first compute this, it will first calculate this, and once the calculation was done, so whatever the thing which was there in the brackets, first it will calculate or compute or whatever it was supposed to do, it will do that, and it will display the final output using this print. You got to know, right? Now, the same thing that we can perform, you can also add. Now, if you see, what are the basic mathematical operations that you have? Addition, subtraction, division, what else? Multiplication, power. Okay. There is something called modulo operator. Modulo operator basically gives you the reminder. Okay. And whenever you want only, for example, when you divide an odd number with an even number, you will get a decimal number, right? If I don't want that decimal point, then you might be using two different, sorry, two slashes or two divide signs, so that you will get only an integer when you divide. So my question is right now, can you, your work, I will be giving certain work to do right now. Okay. Now you can do any kind of mathematical operations on the number. Now what number is this? What value is this? What kind of data type is this? Since it is an integer, we call this data type as an int. For example, if you really want to see what exactly this variable is, let's see, a equal to 2, b is equal to 3, and c is equal to a plus b. And if you see, print 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 c, and you will get the result, right? Now if you see, I got the result, but I just want to know what is c. What is it, a hint or float or string? How will I come to know? There is something called type. There is something called type. When you call this, oops, when you call this, it will go you it will show you what kind of variable is this. Oh, so I think you can't see it. Okay, let me clear this. See, it showed me the class type hint. Okay, I will explain you what is this class and all in the later classes, but you just got to know, right? What kind of a variable is this? Is it hint? Is it char? Is it no string basically? Is it float or is it boolean? So you have to do your work is to do with the same thing, something called float, because integer and float are basically similar, but space allocated for the int is different and the float is different, but you might be doing the same calculations on this. True. Now your work is to perform the basic mathematical operations, which are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, the power, the modulo operator, and then the two divisions part, so that you will get an integer out of a float. So you have to do these basic mathematical operations on that and get back to me in the classroom. Okay, clear? Now the same thing that you're gonna do it. Okay, I'm not going to tell you these things in detail because you already know such basic thing, but as I need to explain you, I'm explaining you. Clear? Now we are done with hint. We are done with something called float. True. Now let's deal something called, okay, boolean. True. Now what do you mean by boolean? Either it is something called 0 or 1. For example, if I would like to, hmm, if I would like to print, oops, let's define a variable so that I can convert this into something like this, for which we can do that directly. We can call it as print. See, now what I have done, okay, I have taken a value and I just want to know what is the binary value of this a, or else you can directly put, instead of a you can directly put 2 also, whatever you want to do it you can do it. Okay, and if you execute this, see you can see that 0, like, no, this is something called, it's an indication that this is a binary, a boolean value. Okay, and the 1 0 is something called which defines the value to. Okay, for let us assume it is something called 9, and see what it is going to show you. See, you see, isn't it not the value of 9? Isn't it not the value of 9? Can you see it here? 1 0 0 is a value of 9, right? True. See, that means this is how you can come to know whether the value is boolean or not. If it is not defined something like this in front of a value, then it is not a boolean. Clear? And if you want to do it something like this, and if you really want to put that in something called only 1 0 1, and if you want to see this output, and you can also see that, oh, wait, since it is a boolean, oh, there is syntax error. The base value to be true. Since it has two values, zeros and ones, I need to give what kind of value that I'm putting. So since boolean has two values, so the base should be 2, right? If you execute this, oh, where am I going now? This I put, see, you got the value. Clear? You understood? Let me clear it off so that you know you might understand. Let me put another one here so that you know you can define. See, you understood? Now, if a number is given, you know how to convert into boolean, and if a boolean number is given, you know how to convert into something called a number. True. This is another data type where you have to know. Okay. Now, this is where these are the basic first few initial data types that you're gonna do. But when it comes to something called data structures, where you see different kind of data types where which are structured in a way, that's where you see something called string. You heard about something called string, list. These are the first data structured in which the data was arranged in a particular way. Clear? You want to know? So in the next class, what we're gonna do, we're gonna describe something called these data structures in a way defined, and how we're gonna use these data types and how we're gonna call it. Clear? And there are certain associated methods or functions with these data structures, and how we're gonna manipulate this is going to take a big no huge amount of time when we go each and every data type, fundamental data types. Okay. Before that, I just want to conclude some other thing. Now these are the basic fundamental types, right? These are the basic fundamental types. Now there will be something called, okay, there will be something called, if there is a scenario where, okay, let me tell you, these are the data types which are basic thing. But if you are really in a practical world, you might be not using this. Okay, these are the basic structures. Basically, this is starting point where you have to learn. But when you go to something called a real-time project works, okay, in that case, you have to create your own data types. Okay, you have to create your own data types. We call that data types as something called custom data types. Custom data types. Okay, what is this? These custom data types are built using class. You got it? That's the reason when we type, no, have you gone to something called this one? When we have called type function, right? Okay, let's see this. So if you want to comment a code, here we use something called dash, this sign. Okay, the comment sign is this. Now, if I would like to know this type of a, and if you see here, you see something called, see, something called class. Even this was derived from this particular class. So in future, if you really want to create your own data types, then you use something called class. Using class, you basically create your own data types. Now apart from this, there will be a scenario where there is also something called specialized data types. Okay, these data types basically you can get it from something called packages. You basically call it packages or modules, where you can get it from library. Okay, there is something called Python library. From this particular library, you call the packages or the modules, where we call this as a specialized data types. Clear? Now When it comes to string, list, dictionary, tuple, and set, these basically comes under something called data structure, and we would be discussion. We'll do that discussion for this in the later class, right? So for now, any questions till date? Now, your work would be this: you should know how to link your GitHub account, okay, with this VS Code, and this is your task for tomorrow. You have to make sure perform what operations, the basic operations on float data type. Once you are done with this, you have to push this code into GitHub. Okay, create a folder called create a file called float dot no, not float, basically a sample or the first Python class or something else, and which you have to write float related problems like the basic operations that you might be performing on float, addition, subtraction, and all, and you have to save it. Once you have done with that, you have to push that code into GitHub. Clear? So for the next class, please make sure you are ready with this, and we'll start tomorrow this next one, because this is going to take the entire time tomorrow. Only this one. Okay. So any questions as of now? Any question?
Anna, how should we post that? I mean, after doing all these problems, how can we post it in GitHub? Like,
You have to no. That is what your work. What I told you. When you don't know what you have to do.
sorry, Anna, I didn't get you.
So what I'm telling you. When you don't know what you have to do it, what you have to do.
Google it.
Do research. Do some kind of work from your end too. How can I push my code from Visual Studio to something called GitHub?
Okay.
Okay, it's very easy. If you want to push your code from terminal, there is one way, or else Visual Studio have that feature of integrating GitHub. Learn how to integrate that. Once you are done, you can directly publish your code from Visual Studio to GitHub. Clear? Get to know.
Mm,
You will come to know, right? So any questions as of now on this class?
mm,
No. So we'll see you in the next class, tomorrow's class, and we'll get back to you on this. Here, if you have any doubts, please do reach out to me in the classroom. Okay, I'm always there, 24/7. Clear? Chalo. Fine. We'll see you in the next class. Bye bye.
okay, Anna.
Bye bye.
Bye.